The history of the House of St. Laurent is a colorful one, specifically defined by its founder's lice-smoking tuxedo and Hedi Slimane's brand overhaul. This is what makes the Parisian fashion label so culturally significant. When Yves Saint Laurent founded his namesake fashion house in 1961, the Algerian-born designer introduced a revolutionary take on women's clothing, inspired by the structure of menswear and the feeling of power that came with wearing it. His approach was a celebration of gender fluidity that shook the fashion industry. Ever since, the likes of Albert Elbaz and Hedi Slimane have interpreted St. Laurent's vision for the brand, and it is Anthony Vaccarello, a bespoke designer who now sits at the helm of affairs for the label. Yves Saint Laurent was discovered by an influential French writer and illustrator by the name Michael de Brunhoff, who published his sketches and introduced him to Christian Dior. Yves got his first as Dior's design assistant and took over as creative director when the founder suddenly died in 1957. In 1961, with an archive of Dior haute couture and ready-to-wear collections behind him, strengthened by a wealth of opinions about how modern women should dress, Yves Saint Laurent launched his first couture collection. The collection opened with a peacoat and wide-leg trouser combination. This launched the Saint Laurent Rive Gauche, a ready-to-wear line, in 1966. Although he only became creative director of Christian Dior when he was 21, the revolutionary designer grew up a shy and timid schoolboy with two older sisters in a Mediterranean villa. He was often bullied by peers at the Catholic school he attended, and as they say, the darkness forges the best light, he took refuge in design. At such a young age, yet tender and feeble, he would gather scraps of his mother's clothes and create small couture ensembles for paper dolls, and fictionally stage fashion shows with these dolls to entertain his siblings and their friends. As he grew older, his desire expanded into crafting dresses for his mother and sisters, who ultimately became his first customers. In 1953, it was reported that Saint Laurent submitted 3 sketches to a contest for young fashion designers organized by the International Wool Secretariat. Saint Laurent won first place and was subsequently invited to attend the awards ceremony held in Paris in December of that same year. During his stay in Paris, Saint Laurent met Michael de Brunhoff, who was then editor-in-chief of the French edition of Vogue magazine and a connection to his father. De Brunhoff, known by some as a considerate person who encouraged new talent, was impressed by the sketches that Saint Laurent brought with him and suggested he should intend to become a fashion designer. Saint Laurent would eventually consider a course of study at the Chambre syndicale de la haute couture, the council which regulates the haute couture industry and provides training to its employees. Saint Laurent followed his advice and, leaving Oran for Paris after graduation, began his studies there and eventually graduated as a star pupil. Later that same year, he entered the International Wool Secretariat competition again and won, beating out his friend Fernando Sanchez and young German student Karl Lagerfeld. Shortly after his win, he brought a number of sketches to de Brunhoff, who recognized close similarities to sketches he had been shown that morning by Christian Dior. Knowing that Dior had created the sketches that morning and that the young man could not have seen them, de Brunhoff sent him to Dior, who hired him on the spot. Although Dior recognized his talent immediately, Saint Laurent spent his first year at the House of Dior on mundane tasks, such as decorating the studio and designing accessories. Eventually, however, he was allowed to submit sketches for the couture collection. With every passing season, more of his sketches were accepted by Dior. In August 1957, Dior met with Saint Laurent's mother to tell her that he had chosen Saint Laurent to succeed him as a designer. His mother later said that she had been confused by the remark, as Dior was only 52 years old at the time. Both she and her son were surprised when in October of that year Dior died of a heart attack at a health spa in northern Italy. In 1957 thereafter, Saint Laurent found himself at age 21 the head designer of the House of Dior. His spring 1958 collection almost certainly saved the enterprise from financial ruin. The simple, flaring lines of his first collection for Dior, called the Trapeze line, a variation of Dior's 1955 A-line, catapulted him to international stardom. Dresses in the collection featured a narrow shoulder that flared gently to a hem that just covered the knee, His fall 1958 collection was not greeted with the same level of approval as his first collection and later collections, for the House of Dior, featuring hobble skirts and beatnik fashions, were savaged by the press. In 1959, he was chosen by Farah Diba, who was a student in Paris, to design her wedding dress for her marriage to the Shah of Iran. In 1960, Saint Laurent found himself conscripted to serve in the French army during the Algerian War of Independence. Neri Cara writes that there was speculation at the time that Marcel Boussac, the owner of the House of Dior and a powerful press baron, had put pressure on the government not to conscript Saint Laurent in 1958 and 1959, but after the disastrous 1958 season, reversed course and asked that the designer be conscripted so that he could be replaced. His most iconic brand, the lace smoking, appears as a sharply tailored all-black tuxedo, and it remains the signature style that defines Saint Laurent's impact on fashion. A revolutionary addition to his 1966 haute couture collection, it hit the runway in Paris and gathered mixed reviews. Fashion buyers didn't include it in their stores, but celebrity trendsetters like Bianca Jagger, Catherine Deneuve, and Nan Kempner were among the first to wear it. In 1975, the renowned fashion photographer Helmut Newton shot the look for French Vogue on a dimly lit cobbled street in Paris and secured its now iconic status. YVES Saint Laurent continued to build upon his stellar design portfolio and was later bought by the Gucci Group, who appointed Tom Ford to head affairs. Ford signified a new mood for the label. His debut collection was designed to make an impact, and it presented monochromatic looks completely void of the accessories that Saint Laurent had worked so hard to perfect. The relationship between the two creatives was tense, with Ford claiming that Saint Laurent didn't approve of his vision for the brand, despite critical acclaim and skyrocketing sales. In 2002, Saint Laurent retired to Marrakech after battling with health and drug issues, and the bow that he took at his final show, one that presented a nostalgic look back at 40 years of work, was openly emotional. The couture side of the fashion house was officially closed, and the focus was placed solely on ready-to-wear under the banner YVES Saint Laurent Rive Gauche. Between 1999 and 2004, Ford worked relentlessly to perfect 16 hotly anticipated collections a year for both YVES Saint Laurent and Gucci, so it came as little surprise when he combined his efforts and launched his own namesake label. It was former Miu Miu designer Stefano Pilati who took over as creative director. His first collection in spring/summer 2005 presented a feminine silhouette that felt new and somewhat off-track for Saint Laurent, with wide waist belts and voluminous skirts replacing the sharp tailoring and minimal details that it had become known for. In 2012, he was replaced by Hedi Slimane. While each of Saint Laurent's successors had undoubtedly made their mark on the fashion house, none transformed it quite like Slimane. His dramatic 4-year rebranding of the label, which stripped Ides from the nomenclature, certainly divided opinion. Saint Laurent Paris was on the receiving end of a media backlash, which is perhaps why Slimane chose a life in LA and famously avoided press exposure in favor of his singular vision. It is this vision that embodies what we know to be the Saint Laurent look today, and it is consistent across both the men's and women's collections. Luxurious, beautifully crafted leather biker jackets and rock-inspired boots have become the house fort, as well as metallic party dresses that reference the edgy glamour of the 1970s and 1980s. Slimane took a unique and controversial approach to runway shows, casting models reminiscent of the Kate Moss heroin chic era, playing music recorded especially for the event and fusing men and women collections in a bid to emphasize the gender-fluid message. It is now a label that embodies youth culture, taking its classic pieces and elevating them to premium status in a way that feels rebellious and cool. Slimane left the company in 2018, and his successor, Anthony Vaccarello, remains at Saint Laurent to this day, and he also brings yet another fresh outlook on how the label should be driven forward. If you enjoyed the video, share with your friends. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the notifications bell to stay connected with the channel.